Hi everybody, happy Monday. I hope that you had an absolutely brilliant weekend and it's time again for history. Well done everybody with your work on Dr. Bernardo. Now we're moving on to just what it was like to be at school in 1895 in comparison to what it's like to be at school now. But before we get on to that, I think it's very, very important to give you a very brief history of education in England and how education has taken place in all of those hundreds of years before. So, before 596 AD, which I'm sure you'll all remember is Saxon times, children would learn to be an apprentice, and it would be whatever their fathers did. If they were boys, whatever their mothers did. If they were girls, they would train to do that same job, and they would stay at house in the village, and they would train to do exactly the same job as their parents. So a blacksmith's son would become a blacksmith, a tailor's son would become a tailor, a pig farmer's son would become a pig farmer, things like that. Now, this very much continued, but what they realised was, at the time, priests didn't have wives, they didn't have children. So there was nowhere in particular to train to become a priest until you went into the priesthood, until you joined the church and became a monk or a priest. So, in 596 AD, this is in Saxon times, this is before England was one country. King Ethelbert and St. Augustine formed this school here. And this is exactly how it looks nowadays. Obviously, it was a full school at the time. And they decided that people needed to learn how to become a priest or a monk from a much earlier age. So they would go to church until they were old enough to become a priest or a monk. Now, King Henry I, who was the son of William the Conqueror, he decided in 1096 that it would be a good idea to start up a university, somewhere not just teaching how to become a priest or monk, but, other things like history. He taught Latin and Greek and all of these famous myths that you've been learning recently. And then in 1209, Cambridge University started up. Now, that was Richard the Lionheart at first, and then his brother, the really unpopular King John I, that set up this school. You might have heard of King John from the stories of Robin Hood. Those universities, though, as we know, universities are for older children, young adults, actually. So then in 1441, Eton College was started. Now, this was for children, and initially poor children, to go to school. And but nowadays, the fees, it will cost you about £45,000 a year to go to Eton College. This is what it looks like now, and the school is still going. Okay. Then we fast forward a few hundred years to 1757. And this is when the William King Sunday School movement started. William King thought it was important that children learned RE and specifically about the Bible. Now, most children in those days were working, and they would work 6 days a week, whether it was down the mine, in very, very early factories, in farms, things like that. Most children work 6 days a week. And then on Sunday, they would go to Sunday school. This quote is directly from William King himself. The children were to come in after 10 in the morning and stay until 12. They were then to go home and return at 1. After a reading lesson, that's the first thing in the morning. Actually, when we have our reading lessons, they were sent to church. After church, they were to be employed in rehearsing the Bible until after 5 and then dismissed, with an injunction to go home without making a noise. So there you go, children then were expected to move quietly around the school and even quietly all the way home. In 1826, the University College of London was built. Now, this is important because it was the first school that wasn't linked at all to churches. The first non-Christian school in England. 1818, just beforehand. This was when this man, John Pound, started up the Ragged School in Portsmouth. Afterwards, there were many ragged schools, including Dr. Barnardo's. Let's read what it says here. Pounds was severely crippled in his mid-teens after falling into a dry dock at Portsmouth Dockyard, where he was an apprentice to be a shipwright. After that, he would look around the streets to find children who were poor. He would take them into his workshop, as you can see here in the picture, and he would teach them the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now, that's always been a bit of a joke because we can see that only one of those 3 words actually starts with an R. The small workshop had as many as 40 children crammed in, and he would entice the children to his shop with baked potatoes and give them a free lunch. By 1831, a quarter of all children went to Sunday school. This was the first time these figures had been reached. And then by 1840, over 50% of all children were at school. And they were split. Rich children went to private schools, and poor children went to church schools and poor schools. There wasn't really a middle class yet at those days, so there were either very, very few rich people and a lot of poor people. And then in the Victorian age, between 1870 and 1891, so contemporary to the time of Dr. Barnardo, education was made free by Parliament, and it was also made compulsory. By 1891, everybody had to go to school.